Hi, I'm attorney Chris Reich, and in this video I wanted to cover some of the changes we're seeing in limited jurisdiction courts in Arizona as a result of the COVID-19 situation. The Arizona Supreme Court's been issuing administrative orders, kind of changing how they are recommending courts conduct themselves during this public health crisis. In the past, in a criminal case, you have a right to a speedy trial. This means your case has to keep moving forward in a particular timeline, and if it doesn't, you might be able to get your case dismissed, basically because the state would be violating your right to a speedy trial. As a result of the coronavirus and delays that's creating, the Arizona courts have just said, we're just going to pretend that right doesn't exist because we're having a health crisis. The other thing we've seen is a lot of telephonic court appearances. Our office is in Maricopa County, and in the past, when we would appear in limited jurisdiction courts in Maricopa County, we'd have to physically appear in person. Now, almost all of the courts have been allowing telephonic appearances to try and reduce the number of people in the courthouse. This isn't completely uniform, but we're just seeing a lot more of that. In courts outside of Maricopa County, most of the time we'd be allowed to appear by phone because they're at such a great distance and there's usually not a lot of attorneys around a lot of small towns in Arizona. Most of those courts are still allowing telephonic appearances. We're seeing a couple problem courts who are still insisting that people drive, you know, 4, 5, 8 hour round trips to appear in their court despite the public health crisis. I'm not sure what the logic there is. The other interesting that we've seen, again, we talk about one of these courts that's an 8 hour round trip away, and sometimes we have to file paperwork in those courts. We could either FedEx it up, or a lot of courts would let us fax or email in a filing. Some courts, though, for years, they just refused to acknowledge the existence of a fax or email, and they would make us physically file paperwork there. That seems to have changed. Most courts in Arizona seem to have discovered the existence of email and fax and will now let you conduct your business with the court by email or fax. This has been quite convenient, and it should have happened a long time ago, frankly. Some courts have just closed down, like Phoenix Municipal Court basically closed, put all their cases on hold, and they're setting dates into the fall at this point. A lot of other courts are just delaying things out into the fall. And then other courts are just kind of continuing on their normal schedule at this point and trying to do more stuff telephonically. Currently, we are having no jury trials in Maricopa County, or I'm not aware of anywhere in Arizona right now, because with the public health crisis, they're not going to impanel a jury. So those have just kind of been put on hold indefinitely at this point. And the final change, this is kind of weird. So we talked about how they've just kind of forgotten about speedy trial rights. The other procedural thing that courts have just disregarded at this point has to do with change of plea hearings or entering of guilty pleas. In the past, if you want to plead guilty to a criminal charge, you would typically have to show up in person at court so the judge can see you, confirm your identity, and ask you a bunch of questions they're required to do before they'll accept a guilty plea. Sometimes you could do that by mail by filling out a bunch of paperwork and then getting a separate document with your fingerprint on it signed by law enforcement, again, to confirm your identity, to confirm who is actually pleading guilty to this charge. Now, a lot of courts have just said, that wasn't really necessary. Just send in the signed paperwork. They may still do a telephone call to ask the defendant questions, but we're having some courts that just aren't even doing that anymore. It's really bizarre. The most interesting thing here is that we have all of these theoretical laws and constitutional rights that were just kind of, the courts in Arizona decided weren't actually necessary, and we're just going to forget about them right now. It'll be interesting to see how this changes court policies going forward after we're done with the coronavirus.